fallacy of build it and they will come, why KochXR values project management. My name's Alyssa Whittington, and I lead the KochXR group, which is a group of individuals devoted to bringing XR technology to Koch companies so that they can interact with and view their data through the XR lens. I'm a chemical engineer by degree, and in 2019 I saw a demonstration of virtual reality that caught my attention and made me want to take a course to become an XR developer, which I did in 2020, a great year for remote learning.
My name's Robert Ray, and I've been with Koch for 18 years. I started my career with Koch in operations, transitioned to the learning and development team, and while I was a part of the learning and development team, I had this opportunity to be a member of an experimental use case there at the site to use immersive technology to be able to upskill some of our technicians. Fast forward to 2025, I'm on stage talking about project management.
So we both work for, obviously, Koch Industries. You can look it up if you're not familiar with it. It's a very diverse company, and it provides products and services to help people improve their lives. And that can be anything from creating nylon fiber for airbags at Invista, to engineering sensors at Molex, to manufacturing glass at Guardian. All right, so we've been doing this for 7 or 8 years now, working in the XR space, and we've had a lot of successes and some failures. And from those, we've taken an approach as we work on our roadmap to keep a few things in mind. The first is, what do we want to develop in terms of depth versus breadth? Do we want something that's a mile wide and an inch deep, and it brings a small amount of value per capita, but it applies to a lot of people? Or do we want to build something that's a mile deep and an inch wide, and it brings a ton of value per person, however less people are using it?
I can't see the slide. Also, we want to understand, is the product, are we developing a good product? The product that we're developing, is it going to be something that's going to be used across our industry, as well as being able to create value?
So how we began our journey, rewind back to 2018, the Camden site had a process called string up. Robert, can you demonstrate string up for us? All right, so Robert has in his one hand a vacuum gun, and he's pulling nylon fiber around the faceplate of a machine, as you can see the animation here. And it's something that only a few, maybe 24 people go through each year to train on. It's something that takes a really long time to learn, and there's no great way to learn it except by doing it. So this became obviously something that would be perfect for virtual reality. It is tactile, it involves muscle memory. It's a great use case. But from the project management standpoint, it also made a lot of sense because the financials of it were concrete. String up is only done when part of the machine breaks. And in that time that the nylon fiber breaks, you're making bad nylon. It's going in the wastebasket. It's impacting your yield. So if you can teach someone to string up faster or to learn to string up at all, then your yield goes up. It's measurable. It's obvious.
Again, this was early on in our XR experience. This was formulated as an experiment. We didn't know if it was actually going to work or not, so we didn't have those internal capabilities, so this had to be contracted out to a third-party vendor. There was also some questions about, from the development standpoint, how are we going to host this? How are we going to be able to deliver it for individuals to be used there at the site? New technology, a lot of unknown answers as well. As a project manager from that part was being able to connect all the right individuals and have that conversation, right? Understanding the SMEs is like understanding what are we going to need, what kind of content we need to be involved in that, as well as tracking that value. Now, the tracking the value is not only the ROI that of course, you want to develop something to get that return on investment, but also the feedback that we're getting from the end users. Is this something that we're going to be able to use to upskill, future technicians in the process?
String up was a great success, but now our question was, can we also do that mile-wide approach, something that applies to everyone? Sites have different needs. However, one thing that's universal is the need for health and safety. One of the sites expressed a strong interest in fire extinguisher training. Also something that's very tactile, made sense, you want to remember to pull the pin, have the sweeping motion, and it's a good introduction. It's something simple for virtual reality. However, this would be a much larger group of users. And again, from the project management standpoint, we decided to take it on because the financials were extremely concrete and obvious. People training had to go once a year to put out an actual fire in a grease tray with a fire extinguisher. With virtual reality, you no longer have to schedule that overtime, requiring someone to come in off shift since they work 24/7, the plant operates and they're on shift. You don't have to bring those people in overtime, and you don't have to expend those fire extinguishers.
Again, this was our follow-up application to the string up, and we were still early on in the development process and not knowing everything that we needed to do to have those internal capabilities. Again, this was contracted out to a third-party vendor, and we relied on them. Relied on them on how to host it as well as deliver it. Again, my job as the project manager was connecting those SMEs or subject matter experts. Now we have an additional layer that was involved in that, was not only from operations, learning and development, but also health and safety, because we wanted to make sure that we had the correct content to be able to upskill our technicians. And this was a different form factor. We now went to a wireless headset or mobile headset. So now that opened up a whole nother barrier for us to overcome with how do we deploy and be able to use these headsets. Now you had a small group of maybe 12, 24, maybe 36 technicians that need to be upskilled. But this, now we've jumped to 300, 400 individuals at a site with hundreds of headsets.
So today, several years later, most of our work falls into one of two categories. The first one is environmental health and safety, and that's the mile wide, inch deep. And we still do value propositions for every single project we do. We love it when the numbers are very obvious, like with string up and fire extinguisher, when we can calculate exactly how much we're going to be saving. But we've earned a reputation within the company that now sometimes we're able to work with our subject matter experts and have them make bets on what they think these projects will do for them. So for something like energy isolation, if we complete the scope as we all agree to it, how many less incidents do you think that we'll have per year? And we can put a value on that, this many dollars less of payout.
Now we've graduated to the point where we're not necessarily dependent on that third-party vendor to be able to do the development piece. We've had those internal capabilities built up to where now we can develop our own applications. And luckily, we have a mature mobile device or MDM platform to be able to not only host that, carry it, but also be able to deploy in conjunction with those hundreds of headsets that would be used to be able to deliver the training.
Our second type of project is the mile-wide, inch-deep capital projects and turnaround division. Turnaround, if you're not familiar with it, it's sometimes called overhaul or outages, but basically it's planned maintenance. When you bring something down on a schedule, do some work, and bring the unit back up. Now, this schedule can be maybe every 10 years, every 20 years, every 30 years, so you only have one chance, maybe 7 days, to do all of the work coordinated at the same time and do it properly. And at the same, you've got people de-insulating pipe, you've got a crane lift going on, you've got people installing pipe. How do you make sure that all of this is orchestrated to work at the same time? We provide simulations based on CAD models that show all of this work going on so that we can provide day one readiness support to these sites. And those 5 days of outages are going to go well.
Again, we have those internal capabilities to develop these type of simulations for the end users, a mature MDM platform, as well as now we have the capability to offer not only in VR, but other platforms to be able to show the data or the animations that we're trying to, or the training simulations that we're trying to build for our customers. Initial planning. This is probably the most critical part from a project management standpoint. for me is being able to have those initial conversations. And I have a little golden rule that I use. It's I have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I use those proportionally. I'm going to listen to what my customers have to say, right? I mean, when I say listen, literally listen to peel that onion back and understand what problem they're trying to solve. What are they envisioning this application looking like? Also, part of that listening process or the scope and quote process is asking some difficult questions. You know, as much as I would want to have an application, the continued scale of VR across the organizations or multiple organizations, does this application or this use case, you know, meet the criteria of what a good VR application will look like? And we have those internal guidelines that we measure those by. And also challenge them. If it doesn't, what other medium can we use? Could this be accomplished in a video? Maybe, you know, nobody likes to hear it, but a PowerPoint presentation. If it's something small like that, can we sit there and be able to do that? And then we move on to our scope and quote process. Now, this is the scope. When you hear scope and quote, is usually what we're going to be able to deliver our internal customers. But we're good at making VR simulations and training simulations. We're not subject matter experts in their field. So we're going to rely on resources that are going to be dedicated to the project. The project's only going to be as successful as those resources and the content and the feedback that they give us. So we're not only telling them what we're going to deliver them, but we're also trying to set those expectations. We're going to need an X number of resources for an X number of hours throughout this whole development process to make sure that we're actually hitting that vision that that individual or the stakeholder wants.
Once we've all agreed to the scope and quote, on comes the fun part of creation. Project managers like Robert are in charge of, essentially acting as Google Translate between the developers who are speaking in C# or JavaScript, whatever it may be, and the users who this may be their first time putting on a virtual reality headset. We need to make sure that the controls are intuitive for them, even if they don't follow necessarily all of the standards, you know. We need to make sure that controls are consistent as well. So the project manager is involved throughout the testing process, feeding that back so that the developer doesn't have to be running back and forth doing development and talking to the customer all the time.
And to the fun part, we get to deploy. We see the value in having the project manager like myself walk hand in hand with the end user, be it a site, be it a company within Koch, is walking them hand in hand. So from the procurement of the headset to the point where you get the headset, you've ordered, you come on site, and provisioning the headset. That provisioning part is being able to connect to your local Wi-Fi. As everybody in here knows that has put a headset on somebody, you have no problems connected to your Wi-Fi at your sites, right? Everybody has that problem figured out, good to go. As well as that MDM support there along with it. We're going to take it to another level. That application that we've built and developed for them, we're going to be able to support that throughout the entirety of the life cycle of that application, as well as what Alyssa alluded to earlier, is that the intimidation factor. We're asking people to put on a headset that maybe have never been in a VR headset before, right? How do you overcome that intimidation factor or the apprehension? So be able to be a resource for them to be able to have those best practices in place and help share that knowledge throughout the organization, because now we're talking about hundreds of headsets. So, and just be that resource to be able to help them through that journey.
We like to refer to it as our white glove service thing.
Absolutely.
Our customers know that when they call us, someone's going to pick up and walk them through whatever trouble they have, or direct them to a guide or a site champion. And the least fun part of project management, stewardship. However, extremely important for showing management that this is useful. We need the project managers communicating usage on a headset. And we're lucky to have a very mature MDM solution where we can see analytics, we can see who's taking trainings, how they're scoring, and then compile that data. Oh, look, everyone is failing at this one question. I guess our familiarization module wasn't that good and we should probably tweak that. Or look at the trend of scores over time, and in fact, compare that to how it's going in the real world. Are yields truly up? That's a big part of project management, and showing upper management that XR has value.
Also, to be able to add on to that a little bit is that white glove services, make sure that you have reference material, be it documentation, that's going to walk them step by step Because it might be, this is on-demand training. It might be 2, 3 o'clock in the morning when some of these people are taking the training. Do you have documentation in place to be able to help them understand some of the barriers that they might face? And as well as having complimentary videos to sit there and maybe show them step by step along with that documentation, as well as building those capabilities within the site. So have those champions there at the site to be able to block out some of those barriers.
You mean you don't want 2 a.m. calls
No, not 2
about
a.m.
how to
calls.
turn the headset on? Yeah. There's certain calls that your project manager should be taking and ones that they shouldn't be taking, and that's what documentation's for. So what happens without project management? What if you just have a bunch of developers?
Developers like to develop things, right? That's in the title. They develop things and they want to develop great applications. But maybe, sometimes if you don't have those guardrails to the left and right, that application or the scope can have a little bit of creep. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that developers have all the right content that they need and the reference and feedback so we can maintain the original scope that we talked through and be able to capture the vision of what the stakeholders want. Developers also build really good applications, but what we don't want to do is have a great application that we think everybody's going to be able to use, but no one uses it. Again, that ties back into that application, as well as sitting there walking them through that journey. A lot of times, the fallacy of it is if you build it, they'll come. You can't just build the application, hand it to them and say, here, I've got a great application, here's the headset, run with it. A lot of that comes along with best practices, that documentation that we talked about earlier, and being able to have that resource to be able to help them guide them through that journey.
So imagine you've got your awesome application that's per the scope, and it's deployed well, but no one is measuring that it's actually being used. It might as well not be being used because you won't continue to get support if you can't show that that application is being used, however much it needs to be to hit the targets. This is where MDM comes in, where analysis of usage comes in. It's critical. And then finally, you've got an application. It's perfect. People are using it. It's deployed well. You can show the usage, but you're just making an app. And then you're making another app. And then you're making another app. And none of them connect with any intentionality. Our environmental health and safety applications are a suite of tools, and they're meant to be used together routinely each year. So our lockout program, or our line break training, builds on the energy isolation training. And this, all flows into a mature learning and development program. So building with intentionality in the same way that we want our sign-offs, our completions to go into our existing LMSs. We want to integrate, and we want our applications to have their information flow from whatever procedure repository is out there. We want, if there's existing chatbots, to tie into those. We don't want to create on an island our own set of tools. We want to be fully integrated with the existing tools because that leads to longevity of products. Thank you, everyone. Any questions?
I'll cover it. Just wanted to say thank you for those amazing insights. Practicals, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
I am getting my steps in, yeah. Here we go.
So I love that you brought up at the end the integration into LMS. I'm sure you have some safety compliance pieces. So very interesting concept on how you're getting virtual reality or augmented reality linked to a traditional LMS. Can you speak a little bit more about how that integration happens?
Sure. So Koch has multiple subsidiary companies, and they all have their own LMSs already out there. So our challenge is really to integrate with what already exists, but we just use XAPI statements mostly. Or SCORM statements. That's usually whatever the LMS wants. We will send them that completion. And it also relies on, at the very beginning of the training, having a good way to sign on, whether it be through employee ID, single sign-on, whatever it is, and ours depends on the IP level of the application as to how they sign on. But once they do, they know who it is. Alyssa Whittington completed the training with 150% score. We can send that to the LMS through an XAPI statement.
Say that.
It can be assigned to them if the LMS, or sorry, if their training plan, we've got several different platforms.
I'll take a step at that. So I work with our LMS administrators, and what they've done is they've built teams. They assign that content to that team, assign individuals to that team, and it's assigned to them on a routine basis. So it might be 12, 24, 36 months. And then once they've completed it, because it's totally separate from the LMS, we're just sending that XAPI statement back to the LMS to be for like a compliance piece, make sure that we're able to track that. But none of the VR sims or trainings themselves are not a part of the LMS.
Attached.
It's sending it to that.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Great question.
I think we've got a chance for one more. Do I see your hands up? Oh, crikey, you are making my steps. Oh, you're too kind, thank you.
Hi, I'll make it very quick. I found myself nodding to a lot of the points that you said. However, to the proving the benefits part, you spoke about the fire extinguisher project, and you mentioned that instead of the operators having to do this training on top of their already existing shift, they somehow do this VR. How does that work? I would assume that the VR training and doing it in real life takes the same amount of time, or did you have a different experience?
So the live one had to be scheduled every year because there was, a safety professional physically there to set the oil pan on fire. So everybody had to basically line up in a line to put out the oil fire and then move to the side. However, the virtual reality training, they can do it in downtime if they have a little bit of, if they have 11 minutes, I think is my record for getting through it. If they have 11 minutes, which they do at some point throughout the year, they can go in on their own, as opposed to scheduling an hour to stand in a line waiting to put out a real fire.
And to add to that, one of the things that we learned during this process when we did specifically the fire extinguisher training is there were some components that we could address in VR that we couldn't address in the real world application. Like Alyssa was saying, we had individuals going up there, putting out the fire, have to step to the side. You had a quick turn, just to try to, indoctrinate that muscle memory. But in a sim, we were able to start bringing in egress points, wind direction. Are we using the right fire extinguisher for this class fire? And things that we haven't done. One of the observations we got back from that, from a user that was doing it for 20 years in the aspect that we were talking about, they put them in the head. We put this individual in the headset, gave them the sim, and one of the first things they were like, I can't get my fire extinguisher to work. They've been doing it for 20 years, they forgot to pull the pin. That's the kind of thing that we would want individuals to do in a training environment as opposed to a real world situation. So just to follow up on that, you can put people in a scenario where they can have real world situations about real world consequences.
I think there's one right in the back, if we have time.
I see light.
Hi. So, oh, good. My voice carries anyway. Hey, so what I'm curious about is you've had so much success with bringing this out. How are you planning for wider adoption across the, billions and billions, all your subsidiaries? How are you building that?
What's next is the question, I think.
Yes.
What are we doing next? Well, Koch has a lot more companies that we haven't gotten into. And we keep refining our tools in Unity to be able to build faster and faster. So our lead developer, Guru, who's absolutely amazing, he's not here with us today, but he's created his own Unity project and program that allows him to create VR trainings faster and faster using standard motions. So we're going to keep creating custom projects and be in more places, get to more users, because there's still a lot out there who've never put on the headset. So we want to reach them.
Okay, I think we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed. That was
Thank
great.
you.